Hi, I'm Brent Sinclair and welcome to Knight Frank Newcastle's commercial property update. This month I'm joined by a prominent developer, Warwick Miller, who's here to discuss the apartment market, building the city's tallest residential towers and a new waterfront project in the Honeysuckle precinct. Thanks for joining us today, Warwick.
Thanks for having me here, Brent.
My pleasure. Now Warwick, the Miller Corporation has been developing property in Newcastle for over 20 years with projects such as the Bolton Street Towers, the Eclipse Apartment on Union Street, the Silk Apartments in the CBD, and most recently the Verve Apartments, which we'll talk about shortly, and that's just to name a few. If we could focus today on the apartment market, over the last 4 to 5 years there's been an unprecedented number of new projects throughout the city, with over 2,000 apartments being sold during that time. Firstly, could you tell us who is buying these apartments and what other insights can you tell us about this period of growth?
Well, as you said, say over the last 4 years, there's 2,000 apartments being sold in Newcastle. Traditionally, we found that there are about 500 to 600 offerings, new offerings every year, and about 500 sold every year on an average. The units have been sold in, I think, in 3 areas, you can say. Firstly, the ocean side, or the ocean front, then on the harbour front, and of course then the residential units that are where I've been more focused. Last year we had a very large number on the market. As I said, traditionally we've had 500 to 600 every year, but last year we had offerings of about 1,200, and unfortunately it coincided with the change in bank funding, and that's reflected in the fact that we did sell 500 in 2018, but following that the sales have dropped off considerably due to the bank funding.
Yeah, sure. And in terms of the take-up, who are the buyers that we're seeing coming into the market buying these units?
Developments I do, as I said, are traditionally residential. So I'm offering not harbourfront or oceanfront, but my buyers are owner-occupiers principally, and I believe around 70% owner-occupier, 30% investor. It's quite interesting that a number of those owner-occupiers would actually buy an investment unit as well. We would say that in the owner-occupier category there are many parts to that, and up until recently owner-occupier was a good part of that. Certainly downsizers, and downsizers being folks whose children have left home in areas, more affluent areas, say in Newcastle. And it's interesting, in this last development that I'm doing, I've just finished down here, the very tall towers, we've had a number of buyers who actually come from Sydney. They came from Sydney because they've now got children that have moved up here, professional children, and professionally employed children, and they've got grandchildren. So folks have retired or semi-retired, and they're now wanting to live in Newcastle to be near their grandchildren.
Sure.
So, as I said, principally my business has always been about 70% owner-occupier and 30% investor.
Now Warwick, recently you made headlines shelving your project on the former Empire Hotel site, refunding money to deposit holders. What led to that decision, and what's your take on the current market conditions?
I think everybody knows in Australia that the bank lending restrictions changed what people could borrow, and we put that development on the market with a DA that came from, there was original DA, we didn't actually do it, but after a little period we realised that the plan probably wasn't perfect to start with, and caught with the change in bank lending, it was obvious that we were never going to reach a number of units sold that would actually allow us to use bank funding to actually go on and develop the project. So we marketed it for about 6 months, and we just didn't sell enough to get to the number, and looking at the future, the bank lending conditions weren't going to change, so it was obvious that the best thing to do was to can that project.
Yeah, sure.
And we knew that if we were going to redo it or we're going to add it or do something with it later, we'd actually change the DA. So we canned it, and I just refunded all the deposits back to the people. We will do it again in the future, and we are working on another DA at the moment. It's quite different and probably much more attractive.
Yeah, sure. And just generally market conditions at the moment, what have you got to say about them?
The hard part for a developer in Newcastle and probably around Australia is that people had the capacity 18 months ago to borrow a certain amount of money, and that's been reduced today by 25%, you can say, 20 to 25%. So it's very, very hard for people to go and buy, first-hand buyers and young people, young professionals even, to actually be able to borrow enough to purchase at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Now, Warwick, you've just recently completed or delivered the tallest residential towers in the city.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the Verve Residences and what attracted you to this project?
I've always been attracted to building what I call residential developments. And when I did the Eclipse in Union Street in Cooks Hill, it was away from everything that most people had done. Most people have been building either on the ocean front or on the harbour front, but being an old-fashioned person like I am, I always found it rather strange that we'd have to live in an apartment and drive to a shopping centre to actually get our shopping done. Eclipse allowed people to walk to the shopping centres, and Verve, of course, is incredibly well placed, but it's opposite the Woolworths and Coles and within 150, 200 metres of the harbour. So the location of the site was perfect. The site was large, over an acre in size, and it offered some incredible opportunity to put very high buildings. The views from the building now are just spectacular. Never before seen views in Newcastle. And the buildings extend to 66 metres, so it's just a very obvious place to do a very large residential development. We've always looked at selling to owner-occupiers, and as I said earlier, there's a lot of people moving or want to move from a house with garden and lawn out of that into an apartment. So this just had all of the right ingredients to do that. I was also very fortunate to buy it for the right price. So I had two very good architects put the project together. Philip Thalis from Sydney is a highly recognised Australian architect, in conjunction with a very, very good architectural team, CKDS in Newcastle. There are 212 apartments in the building, and there's some very, very good commercial and retail space down at the bottom of each tower and around the front. So for me, it was a perfect location.
Excellent. And you're on to your next project. We've got you just bought a fantastic waterfront site down at Honeysuckle. What can you tell us about this upcoming project?
Luckily for me, in doing Verve, I found an incredibly good builder called Block from Canberra. And today it's obvious that to be a developer, you've got to be virtually a builder developer. So I formed an alliance with Block. We secured a site. It's the last waterfront or last harbourfront site in Newcastle. There are going to be some other high-level sites or sites with very high buildings built behind us, but it's right on the harbour front. It's right on the corner of the harbour front, so it looks up the harbour. It gave us the opportunity to build or design and develop three beautiful little buildings. There's only about 35 units in each building, and it's just a fabulous location. It is only about 200 metres from Verve, and you can see the site from the upper levels of Verve. And who's your target buyer for this project? This building is basically, it's only got 39 three-bedroom apartments, 51 two-bedroom apartments. There are 6 penthouses and 14 one-bedders. So my target for this will be completely aimed at the owner-occupier. All of the two-bedders and three-bedders and the penthouses have direct ocean views or direct harbour views. So there'll be people who'll probably be downsizers, people who want to leave the house up on the hill and come down. But we will have some sales to country people who traditionally we have always sold 1 or 2 in our developments to people from Mudgee or Parks or somewhere like that who want to come back to the ocean or back to Newcastle. And I guess we'll have young professionals as well. Sure. And when is this being put to the market? When can we expect to see some
opportunity to?
We've gone through the process with the state government architects and we've lodged our DA. I believe that we'll start selling early in the new year, in 2020, and I think we'll look to building from about September 2020 on.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today, Warwick.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, that's all from us. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be sure to keep you updated throughout the year.